Hi, everyone, and welcome to Charitable Giving with Rory Green and Brandon Chapman. Really appreciate you coming to this session today. And we do appreciate those who dealt with the delay of a couple of weeks. We have been really looking forward to hosting this for you. Before we get started, I just would like to run through a few housekeeping items. First off, this session will be recorded. So for those that join late, we will be sending this out to anyone who has registered through the Zoom registration. Secondly, if you have any questions throughout the session, please feel free to type them in through the Zoom function below, and we'll get to them when we can. The objective today really is to share some insights and ideas as it relates to charitable giving, and we hope you'll get some value from the session today. As well, you will be sent an email asking for feedback following the session. So if you have any ideas of ways we can run these better in the future, please do let us know. A little bit about us. So I'm Brandon Chapman. I'm the principal of SaaS Wealth Insurance, empowering business owners and professionals to achieve their financial objectives thoughtfully and intentionally. And joining me today is Rory Green, who is the Associate Director of Gifts and Estate Planning at SFU. She has over 12 years experience in the gifts and estates industry, and she's done some phenomenal work for many folks that I have a deep level of respect for. So really lucky to have her with us today.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
So why don't we kick it off with whatever you'd like to start with, Rory.
Yes, so welcome to everyone who's joining us. I think it's wonderful that you're taking time out of your day to think about charitable giving. I think it's a sign that you're already on a path to wanting to do something meaningful, wanting to do something impactful. And I think it says a lot about you that you're here today. Before we get started, I just wanted to mention that, yes, I do work at SFU, but I'm here sort of as just myself as Rory Green, not necessarily representing the institution. And just as someone who's had the privilege to work with donors to a variety of organizations over the last 12 years, it feels so strange saying that. I'm grateful to work at SFU, but sort of I'm just here as Rory today. But to get us started, I was wondering if people would use the chat box and just try and guess what everyone on the screen right now has in common. So if you could just take a second, it's a good way to find the chat box, make sure you can use it. And if anyone has any guesses of, you may or may not recognize the people on the screen, but something they all have in common. It's not that they're all famous. I get that a lot. Do you have any guesses, Brandon?
That they're all good looking?
Yes, that's a good one. So it's not that they're all famous. It's not that they're all good looking. Actually, they're all philanthropists. That's a good guess. They actually all died without a will. So Abraham Lincoln, Martin Luther King, Heath Ledger, Prince, all people who passed away without a will. And I think it's really interesting because some of the people up on the screen certainly had causes and things they truly cared about that if they had been a little thoughtful and done some planning, they probably could have made a big impact in those causes they cared about. So I think that that just highlights how important planning is and how unexpected things can happen. And so moving into our presentation today, I love this example of Alfred Nobel, who, I love this story. He woke up one day and read his own obituary, and it described him as I think the grandfather of death. I first heard this story from this wonderful guy named Grant Monk, who's a well-respected guy in the charitable sector. And so Alfred woke up and read that he died in the paper, and in his own obituary, as the inventor of dynamite, he was described as sort of the godfather of death. And he thought, oh my gosh, well, first of all, he wasn't dead. He needed to correct that. But also, this isn't what I want my legacy to be. This isn't how I want to be remembered. I'm an inventor. I'm a curious person. I'm a scientist. I'm a pursuer of knowledge and innovation. And yes, one of my discoveries has been dynamite, but you can't sum me up in that. So he used his estate to create the Nobel Prize. And now when we all hear the word Nobel, we have a very different thought in mind. And I think this is a great example of the power of planning and of legacy to really impact how you're remembered and the mark you leave behind when you leave the earth. So I think it's really important before things get bad to think about how you want to be remembered and the legacy you want to have. And you are never too young to start asking yourself these questions. You are never too young to start thinking about the impact you want to have. And in fact, the younger you are, the better, because it gives you a lifetime to find causes that really resonate with you and form meaningful partnerships throughout your life, and in your estate, to have those really wonderful relationships. So, the time to do it is today. The time to think about this is before you need to. And, probably a lot of you on this call right now, you're probably very charitable people. I suspect that when you're asked at Walmart to add $1 to the food bank, a lot of you are probably the kind of people that say yes. When a friend is doing a bike for cancer research, you're probably the kind of people that sponsor them. If your alma mater might email you or call you and ask for a donation, probably you're making once in a while donations to causes here and there. Maybe you're even making donations every month or donations every year to causes you care about. And that's wonderful. And I think what Brandon and I want to talk about today is how can you, by being thoughtful and asking some good questions, take your charitable giving to the next level. And instead of sort of an ad hoc and random approach, how can you, from my perspective, take what you care about, and from Brandon's perspective, plan with your assets to make the biggest impact in a cause that really matters the most to you. And I think we all do have the opportunity, no matter how big or small our assets, to do something meaningful in the causes we care about. We each have that opportunity. And it takes a little bit of planning, it takes a little bit of thought, but how lucky are we that that's something we can do? So, I work a lot with people, with donors who are leaving gifts in their will. And this is some sort of generic Canadian trends. This isn't necessarily just from my own experience, but a lot of people obviously in their planning, and not just their will, but their planning in general, they're thinking about their spouses, their kids, their dependents, family, sisters, godchildren, friends, but also thinking about, the causes you care about. And of course, always, always, always taking care of loved ones and dependents should be the most important part of your financial plan and your charitable plan. And I think most charities you'd talk to would say that, and most financial advisors you'd talk to would say that you really do need to think about your priorities. But a lot of people, when they sit down and have, again, those thoughtful conversations about what do I have and what impact do I want to have, they will find that there is some room to do something meaningful for a cause they care about. And it really takes sitting down and sort of listing everything out to get to that understanding. And if it is possible that you can do something meaningful for a cause you really care about, what is that cause, and how do you decide, where to even get started? There are thousands of wonderful, deserving charities in this country. And it takes some, I think, soul searching and self-discovery before you start reaching out, possibly to charities. So let's think a little bit about how you would begin that process. So why are people including charities in their plans? It's a great question. Most importantly, and this is again Canadian research, this isn't necessarily just from my experience, but they're doing it. People like you are including charities in their plans because they want to help a cause they care about, because they are good, kind, caring people who want to leave the world a better place than when they started. And I really believe that must be everyone on this call. That must apply to you because you're here spending, your lunch break with us learning about this. And I think that says you're already an altruistic, caring person who's interested in doing more of this. People also leave money to causes they care about to be remembered. Where I work, for example, we are able to do named endowments that last in perpetuity. And sometimes that's really meaningful to donors to put their name on a permanent endowment, or the name of a loved one or a mentor or a parent or a spouse, to know that there's an organization that will sort of safeguard that memory, that legacy forever. to give back. To all of you on the call today, I encourage you to think about your own life and the times that someone went out of their way to help you. It might have been a teacher, a coach, a mentor, a colleague. And is there some way that you want to give back to honor what they gave to you? And it can be such a beautiful way. For me personally, I grew up with quite a bad learning disability. And my parents made a lot of sacrifices to help me through school. And I ended up going to university, which was, something I didn't always think would be possible. And so my own personal giving is to an award at SFU for students with learning disabilities. And I've chosen to name it after my parents. And I don't want to talk too much about myself, but I just wanted to share that to get you thinking about, the ways to make this a little bit more personal. So where should you start? I've got a series of questions in this presentation that I would really encourage you to, Brandon will send the slides, to maybe sit down with someone you care about. Maybe it's your partner, maybe it's a parent, maybe it's a close friend, or maybe it's just by yourself, and think about some of these questions. And not all of them are directly tied to charitable giving, but they're meant to sort of tease out in you what are your values and what really matters to you. So what lessons did you learn from your parents or from parental figures or from mentors? How did your upbringing shape who you are? What are the things from your childhood that you feel really made you who you are today? How did where you're from shape who you are? How did your hometown? I grew up in a small town of 3,000 people in rural Ontario. I've told Brandon, I grew up in a town where we didn't lock our doors even when we went on vacation. And you said hello to everybody. And our pool in our backyard was open to everyone in the neighborhood. And for me, I feel like that shaped who I am. And I'm grateful for that. When you think back on your life, were there big, pivotal, life-changing moments? Was it getting a spot on a sports team and the camaraderie and friendships you formed playing varsity sports? Was it something at university? Was it moving out for the first time? Was it meeting the person that you decided to spend the rest of your life with? Was it the first time you went to the top of a mountain and saw the beauty of nature? What are those things in your life that really, really shaped who you are and make you the person you are today? And when you think about those core values you have, maybe start to think about, what can I do to reflect those values and carry those values forward? If you're someone who played on a sports team and that leadership and that teamwork shaped who you are, is organized sports something you want to give back to make sure underprivileged kids have those same opportunities? If you're someone who feels, and I think there's someone on the call who this applies to, who feels like you're your best self when you're skiing down a mountain and the sun is shining and the powder is glistening, are you wanting to support nature conservation? Are you wanting to support ski programs for kids? If you're a hiker, are you wanting to support the parks, preservation of BC parks? So that's a really great place to start, is to sort of reflect back before you look forward. And then think about, what are you proud of? What have you accomplished in your life that you're really proud of? Maybe it's graduating university, or getting your master's degree, or starting your own company, or getting a promotion, or something you've done in your volunteer work. And what are the ways that you were helped in getting there? I touched on this earlier. Did you get bursaries and scholarships at university? Did you have a coach that advocated for you? Did you have a travel grant? Did your parents support you? Were there aunts and uncles? What are the ways that you were helped in accomplishing those really important things? And again, I think when we look back with gratitude, and I'm not saying that any of you didn't work hard, because of course there's a lot of hard work that went into everything you've accomplished, but when we can look back with gratitude at the ways we were helped, that might give you some ideas of how you want to help others. So if you attended a university and you got scholarships and bursaries through university and that helped you, maybe that's something that you want to pay forward so that when the next person is going through and having that great experience, you're there supporting them the way you were supported. So that's also another, thinking about your accomplishments and about what you're proud of can be a great way to sort of start this thought process. And then think again about how do you spend your time? I think how someone spends their time says almost more about them than how you spend your money, because we all have a very limited time on this earth, and you can make more money, but you can never get back your time. So it's actually very meaningful the ways you are choosing to spend your time. Again, your hobbies, your volunteerism, and look for connections between your hobbies and your volunteerism and the charitable impact you want to make. And finally, so we've looked back, we've looked currently at how I'm spending my time, and then let's look forward and let's think about, how do I want to be remembered? Imagine, you know, some people say imagine your obituary. I think that's a little morbid. So instead, let's pretend that it's your 100th birthday and you're lucky enough to have lived that long, and someone is getting up and they're giving a toast to you. What do you want them to say? What are the things that you want to be synonymous with who you are? And again, is there some sort of charitable component to that? Brandon helped build schools in Nicaragua, or Brandon volunteered with the Junior Hockey League every single Saturday, rain or shine. What are those things you want to be remembered for when you're older or when you pass away? So that gets you to, I know this is all very conceptual, but I think it's important to do that conceptual thinking before, it's not as simple as just, well, I lost someone to cancer, so I'm just going to give a gift to cancer and that's it. Like, really do, and I'm not saying not to give money to that cause, but, how does that gift to that charity reflect your values? And within that charity, is there a specific program or a programmatic area or sort of something specific that, be in the broad umbrella really resonates with you? Because it's actually very rare to find a charity that just does one specific thing. I have yet to work with one. I have yet to really even encounter one. So within, maybe when you're starting to think about certain charities that align with what you want to do you need to go have a conversation with that charity, ask to meet with a development officer at that organization and say, look, Rory, I've been thinking, and education means a lot to me, and supporting, low-income students means a lot to me. I want them to have the same great experience that I did going through my education. What are my options? And let sort of go through that process of having that conversation. And a great charitable partner is you stepping forward and wanting to have that conversation. A good charitable partner isn't going to hound you or send you 50 appeals a year. You can even say, call up and say, hey, Susan, could you make sure that I don't go on your mailing list? Or I'd really not like to be receiving phone calls about donations. I would rather just sort of talk to you and make a plan and have my gifts be a little more strategic. That's completely your right to say that. And I think it is really important that a good thought out charitable gift, you're bringing in the charity and ideally you're bringing in your advisor, someone you trust, to sort of have that, there's the three parts of that triangle, right? There's you bringing the representation of your values and your goals. There's your charitable partner sort of bringing the representation of what the impact, what you can do. And then there's your advisor who's bringing that perspective of what's possible within your own situation, how to make smart decisions to make that happen. You might decide, I want to give $100,000, but that might be a conversation with both parties about, but when am I giving that 100,000? How am I giving it? How is it structured? And so it's great to have all those three pieces working together. And I just think you're going to have such a better experience as a donor when you come at it from a values perspective, and when you move from ad hoc giving to thoughtful giving. I really do think you'll find that your experience as a donor is more rewarding, more rich, and enriches your life a lot more, and helps to achieve those goals that you're looking to achieve. And finally, this is sort of my last piece of this presentation, is to make a plan. Talk to your advisor. Once you've sort of thought this through, talk to your advisor, think about what's possible, look at your assets. I'm not a financial advisor. That's not my role. I'm not here to tell you which vehicles to choose. I certainly can tell you maybe what I've seen other people do and why it's worked for them. But it is, I think, important to get advice from someone who's qualified. Again, talk to the charity, because if you've got something specific in mind, it's really good to have a charitable partner, to have conversations with them and make sure it's possible before you go too far down a road. And make a plan. And like anything else, if you sort of plan it out and write it down, it's much more likely to happen. So yeah, that's sort of, from my perspective, how to get started on this journey.
Thanks, Rory. I think that was very well put, and I think your 12 years of experience certainly come through, as well as your values coming from a small town and really being thoughtful and intentional with everything that you do in life. So really do appreciate you sharing some of those insights. I'll now just give a little bit of background on the financial planning side, and kind of with the financial advisor hat on, what are some ways in which people might want to think about things and speak to their advisors. If I'm not your advisor, speak to your advisor in these particular ways. First off, something interesting that was done in a recent study was that affluents say that they are worried about their heirs. 60% are worried that if they give too much money to their children, they'll be too focused on material things. 55% say they think their kids are naive about the value of money. 52% say that they feel their kids would spend beyond their means if given too much. 50% say initiative could be ruined by affluence. 49% say potentially the kids won't do as well financially if they're given too much too early. And 42% have also said that it's kids have found a hard time taking responsibility for finances when things come too easy to them. This is called Affluenza. And why this is important is families that have worked hard to build wealth, typically their thought process is, well, I'll just give it to my wife and give it to the kids, which could very well be the best case scenario for a given family. But thinking intentionally about what you want your money and your legacy to be in the future is something that should be thought of intentionally with your advisor. So going back to some of what Rory spoke about, thinking about what legacy you would want to leave in your community with your family. What are your philanthropic goals? How much control you want over the gift or over your money. So you may hear of some very wealthy individuals who control money from the grave. And some people may want to do that. Some people may not, and there's no right or wrong, but it's really thinking about what you've built over the course of your life and the impact you like to make while you're alive and the impact you'd like to make when you pass away. Some billionaires choose to give away all their money before they pass away. And then there's not much left at the end. And there's pros and cons of that. The pro is they could see some of the impact of what they've built impacting communities around them. You think of like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. You think of Warren Buffett. Others may choose to silently leave millions or billions to causes they care about, that they had been involved with for years previously as a volunteer, or perhaps had touched them at some point in their life. But it really does come down to values. The fact that you're here today shows that you probably do want to make a difference in some way. And I think that if anything you take from today, it really is to just look in the mirror and think about what impact you do want to make now and in the future. So achieving your philanthropic goals may require an innovative philanthropic solution. And so I'll talk about a couple strategies today. Now, whether you have an advisor or not, these are the types of strategies you should be speaking about with your advisor, because they'll be the ones who are equipped and educated to the point where they can provide unique advice to your situation. And to be clear, these are just concepts and ideas. Everyone's situation is unique, and so these may or may not be relevant for you. We'll start off with a couple of case studies, one of which is a couple in their mid-50s. They're retired. They have a net worth of around $6 million. They plan to have an estate value of around $3 million at death based on their retirement projections. They currently volunteer with the Big Brothers Society of Greater Vancouver, graduates of SFU, and they actually have been giving on an annual basis about $1,000 a year, just on ad hoc through the campaigns. And they also make about $3,000 in annual gifts to another wide variety of charities. Second case study is a couple in their mid-30s. They're both earning a good income. They work in tech, making about $150,000 each. Net worth presently around $1 million. They have an estimated net worth at death of around $10 million. They currently sit on a nonprofit board for a charity they care about, and also graduates of SFU, of course, giving approximately $1,000 on an annual basis. They also give to other charities they care about around $2,000 a year. So one option that might, both of these case studies may look at is giving non-registered securities to charities at death. Now, why would this be an effective way to give? Well, there's certain tax incentives built into our financial system that allow you to write off the full amount of the non-registered gift against your income, as well as avoid paying the capital gains tax. So those two benefits make gifting of non-registered securities a fairly tax-advantaged way to give. So for that first case study where the couple had a net worth of $6 million and an estimated $3 million at death, if they were continually withdrawing from their RRSPs over the course of life and potentially having a non-registered portfolio building, some of that money could be given to charity to magnify the gift, as opposed to, and maybe giving it over a period of years, as opposed to waiting until the very end and giving in some other way. So at the end of the day, every situation is different, but what's important to do is look at how your assets are presently structured, think about your values and intentions, and then thinking about how you want to, who you want to benefit most, the CRA, your family, or charity. Most people typically would prefer to see their family and charities receive more of a benefit, and all that comes down to is proper planning. Another option could be a permanent life insurance. This is a good potential scenario for the two case studies I spoke about, because if anyone's giving on an annual basis to charities and continues to give in an ongoing basis, perhaps purchasing a whole life insurance policy that is assigned to a charity could be another way to magnify that gift. Now, the benefits of this is if a charity is irrevocably the beneficiary of a particular policy, it is possible to write off the premiums on an annual basis, which provides ongoing tax benefits, just like giving to charity on a regular basis. And it could create a much larger gift in 10, 20, 30 years. Now, the downside of this, of course, is the charity doesn't receive money on an ongoing basis, and they all, of course, still have ongoing expenses. So there are pros and cons to every strategy, and it really just depends on what the goals and intentions are of the client. Another common gifting scenario that I'm sure Rory's seen in her lifetime has been transferring the ownership of an existing policy to a charity. So this could be a whole life policy that's paid up, and maybe originally it was for a mortgage or it was for something, and they no longer have need for the policy. So if the policy is gifted to a charity, it's possible to write off the cash surrender value of the policy, depending on various situations. And then that charity will be paid the benefits of that when the individual passes away. So these are a couple of options. There are other ways that you can give creatively to charities, but the most important piece is, first of all, understanding what are your goals in life? What are your values? And how do you want to make the greatest impact? There are no silver bullets and one size fits all strategy for anybody. But especially when we're looking at larger gifts, starting the conversation early with the groups that you care about can help align your objectives with an organization's objectives. There's been some very phenomenal gifts given to SFU over the years that I've witnessed as a volunteer and community member. And it's been really impressive to see how some of those programs have evolved and impacted, even to myself as an alumni. So do speak with your advisor, do think about what matters to you and what your values are, and then go from there. Nelson Henderson said that the true meaning of life is to plant trees under whose shade you do not expect to sit. And I think this really does tie together a lot of what we've spoken about today, in that we all are living our own unique life and journey, but the impact that we make in our communities and with our family will carry on long after we pass away. And so it's important to think about what level of impact and how those impacts could be structured. I'll now open the floor up to any questions if anyone has any. And in the meantime, please feel free to plop those in the chat. I did have one question for Rory, just about the 3 deaths. I don't know if we got specifically into the
yes,
but I think it's a great.
This is I believe an indigenous folklore concept of everyone experiences 3 deaths. There's the first death, which is the physical death of the body. The second death is the last time your name is spoken. And the third death, the second time is the last time someone who knew you passes away. And the third death is when the last time your name is spoken. And I've always loved this concept because, again, through a partnership with a charity, there sometimes is the opportunity for what has been referred to as symbolic immortality. So that ability to have your name or the name of someone you really care about live on in perpetuity. Of course, every organization is going to have different policies around the gift level required to meet that threshold to either name an endowment or name a space or name a fund in perpetuity. But it's, again, I think, a great reason why having those conversations early with the charity and with your advisor can let you have more of an impact. So let's say, for example, you're giving ad hoc between $1,000 to $2,000 a year to charity, just sort of here and there when people are asking, or when you're getting asks in the mail, or people are phoning you, or your friends are doing races. It adds up to $1,000 to $2,000. Well, what if there was a charity that for $20,000 you could create a permanent fund, and you could pledge that over 5 years and do $4,000 a year for 5 years. So it's not much more than you're already giving, but because you've been thoughtful about it, because you've sat down and planned it out, you're going to get such a better experience by having those conversations and doing that planning. And if you bring your advisor in and there's some tax efficient ways to make that $20,000 pledge, it might not even really cost you that full $20,000, because if you're eliminating capital gains and you're getting some tax relief on your taxes, maybe it's costing you less. And I don't want to say exactly what that would be, because it's so personal and so unique, but just another example of how thoughtful planning lets you have a bigger impact and helps you accomplish your goals in a more meaningful way.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed today's video, please be sure to like, subscribe, and comment down below. We'll see you in the next video.